AFAjournal.org.
The Riverside County Sheriff's Department will not be blackmailed, bullied, or used as muscle against Riverside County residents in the enforcement of the governor's orders. I believe that all jobs are essential to someone. Leaders do not threaten, attempt to intimidate, or cause fear. Bullies do.
Everything I own is being taken away from me, and they set up a movie company right next to my outdoor patio.
The difference between a big box retailer and a restaurant, or frankly, even a church, are so different, it's unbelievable. It's science. If you're wearing a mask, it's a different story.
500 people in a Lowe's aren't any safer than 150 people in a restaurant that holds 600. I don't believe it. Sorry.
Something is going on with Joe Biden's health.
First of all, it's the president-elect, Joe Biden.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Bryan Fischer.
Howdy and welcome to a brand new broadcast edition of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Bryan Fischer is my name. President-elect Bryan Fischer to you with the same number, exactly the same number as I'm speaking to you right now. I have the same number of electoral votes as Joe Biden. Glad to have you in the conversation. I am Bryan Fischer, your host, congenial, convivial, amiable, and effervescent.
As always.
Jeff and Rob in the house, three amigos writing at full strength. All right, very quickly, before we jump into content, reminder about podcasts. This would be a great time to get a podcast app for your phone and sign up for you can subscribe to the Focal Point podcast on any of your podcast platforms. Never have to miss an episode. This would be a good time if you got friends or family members that you think could benefit from the kind of information that we're bringing to you right now about this election kerfuffle, all of these fraudulent ballots and all that stuff. This would be a good time to send them a copy of one of our podcasts, maybe even the one for today. You can get them at afr.net if you don't get them on your podcast app for your phone. Also, you can live stream the program, video and audio, on our Focal Point Facebook page and on our Focal Point YouTube channel. I'm out of the Google gulag. We just call them Googleog for short. They had me in the gulag for 7 days. Google runs YouTube. And now that's finally, and I'm out on parole on good behavior. I'm not making any promises to the gulag ears of the Google log. All right. Email address is focalpoint@afa.net. You can follow me on Parler and Twitter, same handle, either Parler or Twitter, at Bryan J. Fischer. Also, we're in the Christmas season, thinking about Christmas gifts. Encourage you to think about the possibility of buying the father of a young son that you know, buying a copy of the book, The Boy to Man book, that I've written for dads specifically of 12-year-old boys or boys in that age range, for fathers to read with their boys so that the wisdom of Solomon that I've tried to distill in this book is imparted to your son, Dad, through you. He's listening to your voice. You are the one that's imparting this timeless wisdom of Solomon to your son as he's on the route to mature manhood. You can get that at afastore.net, afastore.net. All right, well, let's turn our attention to the Word of God. We are in, for those of you who are reading and praying along with us, we are in Judges chapter 4 today. You can find the reading schedule and the prayers that go with these passages of Scripture at pray.afa.net, pray.afa.net. You go there today and you'll find the Judges 4, which introduces us to Deborah, the Judge Deborah, the only female judge in the whole list introduced in Judges chapter 4. Now, a couple of things, because a lot of people use this as an example of how women need to be in positions of leadership, interchangeably with man. That's the egalitarian view of the relationship between the sexes, the relationship between the genders, that they're interchangeable, that they're identical, that neither of them has anything unique to offer to a circumstance, to a church, to a family, to a child. They're perfectly interchangeable. That's not the viewpoint of the Scripture. The viewpoint of Scriptures is complementarian, that a male complements what a female brings to the equation, and a female complements what a male brings to the equation. Both have something very unique and special to offer, let's say, to children. That fathers have something to offer to children that mothers do not. And mothers have something to offer to children that dads do not. That's why God has designed the family to operate with one of each. But the regressive church, the social justice warrior church, has taken this as a reason why we ought to obliterate any kind of distinctions, even the ones that are set up in the Scriptures, obliterate any kind of distinctions between the sections when it comes to life in the church. Now, so we need to find some way to deal with this topic of Deborah. I hope to do that in our few minutes today. Deborah had received a message from the Lord for Barak, the son of Abinoam, and she said to him, from the Lord, has not the Lord, this is verse 6, has not the Lord, the God of Israel, commanded you, go, gather your men at Mount Tabor, and I will draw out Sisera, the general of Jabin's army, to meet you by the river Kishon. Don't forget that, the river Kishon, with his chariots and troops, and I will give him into your hand. And Barak did not want to do it. And finally, Deborah says to him in verse 8, or what Barak says to Deborah, she's the judge. She comes to him and says, look, you know what God's told you to do. God's already made his will clear to you. You're to take your troops to this mountain, and God will deliver your enemy into your hand. And Barak was too chicken to do it. He kept hoping, like males often do, that things were just going to get better on their own. So Deborah has to light a burner under his Bunsen. And what Barak says to Deborah, verse 8, go with me. If you go with me, I will go. But if you will not go with me, I will not go. Not exactly a shining example of muscular fortitude on the part of Barak. He wanted Deborah to go to be his rabbit's foot, to be his lucky charm. And now we see why we had a female judge for the first time. God could not find, this is why we had a female judge in Deborah, because God could not find any men, and I'm using this description advisedly, couldn't find any men with the testicular fortitude for the job. So the absence of strong masculine leadership created a vacuum, and a woman was raised up to fill it. Now, this is the truth. This is about life. When men fail in their responsibility to exercise leadership, women will step in to fill that vacuum, whether they should or not. There will be irresistibly drawn to plug that hole. So I will guarantee you that if a man steps back from leadership that God has designed for men to occupy, whether it's the pastor of a church, whether it is an elder in the church, whether it's a worship leader, that if men draw back from that, if they create a vacuum, I will guarantee you that a woman will be ready and eager to step in to that gap. Now, I believe the church is weak today because it has become feminized. Leadership positions that God intended to be filled by men are now being filled by women. And the church has become weak. It's become soft. It's become emasculated as a result. So we get here to a place where Barak is treating Deborah. The word means lightning, by the way. More kind of a dud than a lightning bolt. Treating Deborah as his rabbit's foot, his good luck charm. So notice what he's willing to do out of his own weakness. Because he's too weak as a man, what he's willing to do, you got to go with me. I'm not going to go to war unless you go with me. So what's he doing? He's willing to expose Deborah to mortal risk, to potentially lethal risk, just to cover his own hide. So he was willing to put her safety and her life at risk because he was too weak and fearful and timid to step up and get the job done. So Deborah says in verse 9, I will surely go with you. Nevertheless, the road on which you are going will not lead to your glory. For the Lord will sell Sisera into the hands of a woman. Then Deborah arose and went. So Deborah's point here, my wife is Deborah, named after this judge. That means the word Deborah, the name Deborah means bee, as in busy as, and that would be an apt description of my bride. She lives up to that description has every day for the 44 years plus that we have been married. But Deborah's point here is that when people look back on this event, Barak, because you're so weak, you're coward, you're timidly, when people in history look back on this event and talk about it, they're not going to remember you. They are not going to talk about you. They're going to remember the woman and talk about a woman, the woman who stepped into the breach. In fact, people are going to have a tough time even remembering your name. They'll talk about Barak. They'll talk about Jael, the woman who drove the tent peg through the head of Sisera, the commander of Jabin's forces, but they are not going to even remember your name. They'll talk about the woman who was responsible for victory in this situation, but they aren't even going to talk about you at all. By the way, here in verse 11, just want to mention this for parents. You know, parents are always looking for biblical names. Here's one that not a lot of people consider. I just want to give it to you for your consideration. Verse 11, Heber the Kenite had separated from the Kenites the descendants, listen to this, of Hobab, the father-in-law of Moses. So I'm going to suggest you put Hobab on your list of names for your sons, because it's one that hardly anybody ever uses. You name your son Hobab, he will be the only son in his school who will be named Hobab, and you will be so proud, and he will be so proud of his name. So anyway, verse 13, Sisera called out all of his chariots, 900 of them, 900 chariots of iron to the river Kishon. Deborah had to go to Barak and say, get up, get out of bed. This is the day which the Lord has given Sisera into your hands. Does not the Lord go before you, you weak chump? So Barak went down from Mount Tabor with 10,000 men following him, and the Lord routed Sisera and all his chariots and all his army before Barak by the edge of the sword. Sisera got down from his chariot and fled away on foot. So he's running for his life. He goes to the tent of Jael, who is the wife of Heber the Kenite. That's a descendant of Moses. For there was peace between Jabin the king of Hatzor and the house of Heber the Kenite. So he thought, this would be the place to go. She'll receive me, take me in. So he thought he'd be safe there. So Jael came out to meet him and said, turn aside, my lord, turn aside. Do not be afraid. So he turned aside into her tent. She covered him with a rug. He said, please give me a little water to drink, for I'm thirsty. She went and got a skin of milk and gave him a drink, gave him milk to drink, tucked him in, gave him some milk, probably sang a little song to him, go to sleep, you little baby. Now here's the part that J.D. used to like when I told him this story in verse 21. Now Jael, the woman, she took a tent peg and took a hammer into her hand. Then she went softly to him and drove the peg into his temple until it went into the ground while he was lying fast asleep. Pinned his head to the ground, and Jael bled out, and that was it for him. Now we're told in chapter 5, when there's a poem about this incident, the earth trembled, the heavens dropped water, they fought the kings of Canaan by the waters of Megiddo. From heaven the stars fought, from their courses they fought against Sisera. The torrent Kishon swept them away, the ancient torrent, the torrent Kishon. So what happened to Sisera's chariots? All his chariots got swept in to the Kishon River by this flood. Well, let's go to prayer if you'd be kind enough to join me. Lord Almighty, I bring us before your throne of power and mercy this day. Please fill us with your Spirit so that we do not do what is evil in your sight and be sold into the power of sin in any way. I pray that the women among us will imitate the strength, courage, faith, and boldness of Deborah and Jael and may the men step into the role, the masculine strength, the masculine role God has designed for them. Amen.
Now an angel of the Lord.
This is Richard Land. This is Focal Point with Bryan Fischer on American Family Radio.
Howdy, and welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio. In fact, if you can get Barak's email address, send him a copy of today's teaching from the Word. Barak needed to hear that. All right, well, let's turn our attention to the content of today. You know, we have a feature called Joe Biden's America.
Welcome to Joe Biden's America.
Say it ain't so, Joe. Say it ain't so.
So I'd like to bring you just snapshots of what America is going to be like if Joe Biden has his way. Here's an example. The Democrats are already putting together a bill that would enfranchise felons all across the country. Be mandatory that felons be enfranchised rather than earning their way back by behaving themselves. Nobody's got a problem with that. If they demonstrate that they are good citizens, they've learned their lesson, went to penitentiary, and they were penitent, they repented, they learned, and now they're setting their lives on a straight path. Nobody's got a problem with them getting the franchise. But the Democrats want to make it automatic. Why? Because this is their natural constituency. So if Joe Biden gets in, you can guarantee the Democrats are going to try to ram this through. So every felon in America will already be registered to vote. They're trying to tamper with the ability of state legislatures to shape congressional districts. So they're going to gerrymander every congressional district in the country. They're going to make automatic registration mandatory at DMVs all over the country, so people will be registered to vote whether they want to or not, which means if you have automatic mail-in ballots being sent out to everybody, then there are going to be a whole bunch of people that are going to get these mail-in ballots that have no interest in using them. This is how Democrats harvest mail-in ballots. They get them from people that get them but have no interest in using them.
Yeah, it looks like by this last election, they're trying to redefine the term illegal ballots to undocumented votes.
Yeah.
That would be the next step.
Yeah, that would be. And they want to pre-register 16-year-olds, so they'll be automatically registered as they age out. And they want to invalidate any restrictions. There's 33 states that have restrictions on felons. In other words, they got to earn the right to vote again. That's fine. I'm good with that. I'm down with that. And if they're going to be good, solid citizens, they will be willing to go through that process. But that's just an idea. They're also going to prohibit, the Democrats want to prohibit the practice of confirming that registered voters actually live at their current address. They want to forbid states from doing it. You just have to take their word for it. Whatever the sheet says, that's what you got to go by. And, of course, they're going to try to extend statehood to Puerto Rico and to D.C. and add 2 more solid Democrat votes to the United States Senate. Now, also in Joe Biden's America, he wants Javier Becerra to be his Health and Human Services Secretary. The reason this is a disaster, because Health and Human Services, they oversee what the federal government does to provide support for pregnancies and all that kind of stuff. He's the guy when Joe Biden's vice presidential nominee, Kamala Harris, she was the one that started the prosecution of David DeLayden. She started prosecuting him, wanted to lock him up behind bars, and when Javier Becerra succeeded her, he kept it rolling. So the guy that prosecuted this pro-life journalist wanted to put him behind bars for as long as he could. That guy is going to be in charge of administering programs under Joe Biden that deal with the issue of pregnancy and the family. And here's a judge, an Obama judge. Remember, President Obama declared these illegal aliens legal by executive order. Said, if you whatever, you're legal. And he just did that by executive order because he tried and tried and tried to get it through Congress, could not do it. So finally he said, forget about it. I'm just going to do it by executive order. In fact, he said along the way, if you remember, look, I'd like to do this by executive order, but I can't because I'm not a king. Only Congress can do this. And then he got talked out of that, forget all about it, and just declared them legal. And Donald Trump in 2017 undid that. He went back and reversed that and said, this is unconstitutional, we're not going to do it. Now, this judge in Brooklyn, New York, an Obama appointee, no doubt, has ordered Donald Trump to accept new DACA applications and restore the program in full. So again, something they couldn't get through Congress, this is what they do. This is the Democratic playbook. Just go find a friendly judge. You know, and we're going to get the worst of the worst in public policy. Joe Biden is trying to figure out ways to tie climate change, global warming legislation, to coronavirus relief. Those two things have absolutely nothing to do with each other. But he's going to wed them together because he knows that the American people are easily fooled when it comes to global warming. They believe the swill and the bilge that the earth is catastrophically warming. It is not. That global warming catastrophe, that's a complete sham. It's a scam. It's a travesty-mockery. But under Joe Biden, it will be the law of the land, and he's going to tag it to coronavirus relief. So we're going to get the worst of the worst. One of the things that he wants to do is subsidize the production of energy-efficient vehicles that run on electricity, coal-powered cars, because where does the electricity come from to power these cars? It comes from coal. So don't be deceived. These aren't electric power cars. They are coal-powered cars. but they run on electricity supplied by coal. So what Biden wants to do is a major emphasis in his administration is provide funding for the manufacture of electric cars. Why would you have to provide subsidies for that? Why would you have to subsidize that? Because people don't want to buy them. So you have to subsidize them so they can get down to some kind of affordable range where people, it's like burning corn in your gas tank. The American people don't want to do that. So the federal government had to mandate, this goes back to George Bush. George Bush, we got him to thank for this, mandate that people burn corn in their gasoline tanks. All right. Well, enough of that foolishness.
Let's so, Joe.
Let's try. In fact, I got one soundbite I want to play about Joe Biden, and this is from Ronnie Jackson. Ronnie Jackson is a medical doctor. He was President Obama's doctor, and he's been elected to Congress. He's a representative elect. And here's what Ronnie Jackson, Obama's doctor, and of course he was around Biden every day he was around Obama. He was probably around Joe Biden, so he knew him and observed him. Here's what he had to say, clip number 1.
I still maintain that something is going on with Joe Biden's health. You can look back at previously what he looked like, and you can look at like early on in the campaign. Now, I don't know if, he's getting medicated at this point. There's been a few instances where he looks a little better, but then he's got good days, he's got bad days. I think that he's in a transition period right now where he's developing some early cognitive issues that are just age-related, and I don't think it's going to be good to be commander-in-chief and be in that situation. But, God forbid he becomes our president. We'll figure out this soon. This will declare itself soon enough. But I'm a firm believer that if he gets in, he won't be there for more than a year before something comes up and they have to remove him from office and Kamala Harris is our president.
I have no confidence in his cognitive or physical ability to serve as our commander-in-chief. He doesn't have the cognitive resources. That's the assessment of a medical professional, a doctor who was President Obama's personal physician. One of the realities, and we've talked about this before, this is why I have the same number of electoral votes that Joe Biden does. Nobody has an official electoral vote until December 14. That's when the Electoral College meets, and all the delegations that have been selected at the ballot box by the various states, certified with the state legislatures, they cast their vote on December 14. Nobody has an electoral vote officially till December 14. So with that in mind, listen to Chris Wallace. You have any doubt whether Chris Wallace has gone off the reservation, has gone over to the dark side of the force, listen to this clip. He's interviewing Alex Azar, who is the Health and Human Services Secretary, what Joe Biden wants Javier Becerra to be, and he's interviewing him Sunday about the coronavirus. Listen to their exchange, clip 2.
If President Trump had worn a mask then and urged everyone to wear a mask then, back in April, the way Joe Biden is right now, wouldn't we be in much better shape?
Well, Chris, I welcome Vice President Biden to the club. Since the middle of April, the president's guidelines for reopening have called for wearing masks.
He's the president-elect, sir.
The president has called the president has called masks patriotic acts. We encourage people, please wear a mask when you can't engage in social distancing.
But first of all, it's the president-elect Joe Biden, Secretary Azar.
All right, so that's like Chris Wallace, like a dog with a bone, will not let it go, just nagging Alex Azar to death that he is the president-elect. And the truth is, constitutionally, ladies and gentlemen, according to election law, he is not the president-elect any more than I am, any more than Jeff is, who is in charge of all our vaccination programs, right?
Yeah.
Whatever we haven't got an official title for him yet.
I don't have any official rules yet either, so
okay.
But I am advising you.
Yeah,
and I am an expert.
He's formulating the rules on our breaks in our program
because I have just as many medical degrees as Bill Gates does.
Yeah,
so
sure
I
enough.
qualify.
Now, the Democrats are in a tizzy because the Republicans are raising challenges about this year's election results. And what they are conveniently forgetting that back in 2016, they were yammering endlessly about the illegitimacy of Trump's election because in their view, their benighted view, there wasn't a thing to it. We spent $35 million to find out there was no substance to this whatsoever, that the Russians had intervened in the election on Donald Trump's behalf. So now here's the media right after the election in 2016, and think and ask yourself the question, how willing were these nattering nabobs of negativism, how willing were they to accept the certified results of the 2016 election? Clip 3.
There's no disagreement about Russia hacking the election. The intelligence community, the FBI, Democrats and Republicans believe that Russia hacked the election.
The CIA has concluded the Russians intervened to help elect Donald Trump.
That is where they are in this issue now, that Russia was not only interfering, but was trying to deliver this election to Donald Trump.
You have this very real skepticism about how legitimate was this election.
It wasn't simply that Russia got engaged or involved in hacking the election, but did so to favor Trump.
I think this is a constitutional crisis. I mean, was the president legitimately elected?
Then what it suggests potentially is that the election was in some sense illegitimate. And I don't know where you go from there.
So do you think that Trump in any way is an illegitimate president because of the Russian involvement?
I mean, the Electoral College before the 19th has got to know whether the Russians had an effect.
The Electoral College should behave as it was designed to behave and as it was explained by Alexander Hamilton in the Federalist Papers. It should deny him an Electoral College victory.
And I would like to see the evidence, because if the evidence is there, I don't see any other way than to vote again.
So they're suggesting we rerun the entire election. People say that today. This is fraudulent. We need to do it over again. They say, no, you can't do that. That's wrong. Who would be dumb enough to think of that kind of solution to the problem? Now, also wanted to point out that I'm going to shift gears to that. That's going to be COVID kind of stuff. But let me jump into that now just for a couple of minutes on the whole COVID thing. We got more to come in the next segment on this. But, you know, Governor Newsom is the tyrant governor of the state of California. He's locked down the whole state. I think 97% of the state of California is under a lockdown, which has absolutely no basis in law. Governor Newsom has emergency authorities for 30 days, like most governors. He doesn't have it 1 day, 1 hour, 1 minute beyond 30 days. But everybody's like letting him get away with it. So he's extending these lockdown orders indefinitely. Now, here is the sheriff of Riverside County. Sheriffs are terrific because they are not accountable to governors. Governors don't choose them. Governors don't appoint them. Governors don't put them in office. They are elected directly by the people in their counties. So they are accountable only to the voters in their own county. And here's what Chad Bianco, the sheriff of Riverside County, has to say about this COVID lockdown business.
We were also told there was a potential he would be withholding federal and state funding from counties who did not enforce the orders. Ironically, it wasn't that long ago our same governor loudly and publicly argued how wrong it was for the President of the United States to withhold federal funding from states not complying with federal laws. The dictatorial attitude toward California residents while dining in luxury, traveling, keeping his business open, and sending his kids to in-person private schools is very telling about his attitude toward California residents, his feelings about the virus, and it is extremely hypocritical.
Now, we will come back.
He is expecting us to arrest anyone violating these orders, cite them and take their money, close their businesses, make them stay in their homes, and take away their civil liberties, or he will punish all of us. I believe that all jobs are essential to someone. Leaders do not threaten, attempt to intimidate, or cause fear. Bullies do. While the governor's office and the state has threatened action against violators, the Riverside County Sheriff's Department will not be blackmailed, bullied, or used as muscle against Riverside County residents in the enforcement of the governor's orders.
All right, so
I wish you all a very Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and a safe and happy New Year.
Keep stepping on my own sound bites there. But that's the sheriff of Riverside County. I'm not going to enforce any of these orders. The governor can issue all the orders he wants, but he is dependent upon sheriffs to enforce his orders, and I am just not going to do it. We'll be right back with more. Stay with us. Focal Point, American Family Radio.
Friendships.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Bryan Fischer.
Bryan Fischer.
Howdy and welcome back to Focal Point, the home of the fastest 60 minutes in American media. A couple of quick things I want to mention before we get into discussion of the latest developments in the coronavirus epidemic. Do not forget this from Nevada. In Nevada, the margin there is around 12,000 votes. In Nevada, 1,500 dead voters cast ballots. 40,000 people voted twice. 2,468 voters legally changed their addresses to another country or state. 1,500 voters were listed as deceased by the Social Security Administration. 20,000 voters had a non-Nevada mailing address. 6,000 voters had U.S. Postal Service flags on vacant addresses. In other words, there's nobody that lived at the address to which they were registered, and they want to get us to believe that there was no voter fraud. By the way, the Christmas star, or what a lot of astronomers think may have been the Christmas star that the Magi saw, they were astrologers really from the East, so they studied the stars, just like people who do horoscopes today do. They studied the stars and tried to discern meanings from the gods in the stars. and they saw this, what people call the Christmas star, and that's what led them to Christ. Now, according to astronomers, on December 21st, people today are going to have the opportunity to see probably the same star that astronomers believe the three wise men saw when they were journeying from the east to Bethlehem. The Christmas star, or the Star of Bethlehem, hasn't occurred. This is a conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. They will appear in the heavens to collide and become, as in a conjunction, and become almost a double planet. So exceptionally bright. And that hasn't happened. This kind of conjunction has not happened in 800 years. And I don't know when it was, happened before that it happened somewhere in the era of Christmas. Not going to happen again till March 15th, 2080. So that's kind of a cool deal. All right, we want to talk about, one more thing. Let's grab clip number 7, Rob. You know, everybody thinks that Hollywood is just gone, that there's just no voices in Hollywood, no conservative voices, nobody standing for anything remotely conservative. Now, here's Matthew McConaughey. I really like him. He's one of my favorite actors, just his persona on screen. I don't know him personally or know anything about him personally, but I just like his on-screen persona. But he's definitely an A-lister in Hollywood. And here's what Matthew McConaughey had to say on a talk show with Russell Brand about what Hollywood does toward ordinary people like you and me. Clip 7.
Look, on the other side, on the far left, that would go, well, who do? There is a lot on that illiberal left that absolutely condescend, patronize, and are arrogant towards that other 50%. Many people were I'm sure you saw it in our industry when Trump was voted in 4 years ago. They were in denial that it was real. And some of them were in absolute denial.
All right, so that's Matthew McConaughey. The problem with the left is that they absolutely condescend, patronize, and are arrogant toward ordinary people like you and me, people that they think are not nearly as enlightened as they are. All right, well, let's turn our attention to coronavirus. Jeff, your Reid report, I think, has something to do with that. Talk to us.
Yeah, a Canadian church was prevented from having a drive-in church service. Now, the Canadian, at least in Manitoba, has current public health restrictions. You can't have houses of worship because you're not allowed to have gathering in person of more than 5 individuals, indoor or outdoors. Well, the Congregation of the Church of God in Manitoba scheduled a drive-in service to allow for social distancing because you would remain in the parking lot in your car. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police showed up and blocked all the entries and exits to the church parking lot, not allowing people in. The attendants started parking on the street and started walking there when they were stopped by the police again, threatened with $1,000 US dollar fine if they crossed into the parking lot. Now, what's ridiculous about this is there are hundreds of cars in that same town at the Walmart and the Costco parking lots. So maybe they should just erect a Walmart parking sign and be done with this, you know?
Yeah, go to Walmart and say, we would like to serve as your auxiliary parking lot for this Sunday. And get a sign up there, parking for Walmart only.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is ridiculous. I mean, people are in their individual cars in a parking lot, and the police are going to stop that? I mean, there's no way to decipher that except for an attack on religious liberty.
I don't even remember this, but this same thing happened in Mississippi.
It did.
Yeah, where it was a drive-in service and the police were blocking the entrances to the parking lot so people couldn't go to a drive-in service. They're going to be outdoors. They're going to be socially distanced. But I mean, it's just crazy. Just kind of loco weed stuff going on here. All right. Now, we've talked a lot about the complete hypocrisy. We've talked about that frequently. And I want to play a couple of sound bites here that kind of illustrate this. This first one, this is the owner of the Pineapple Hill Saloon and Grill. Her name is Angela Marsden. Her restaurant is in Sherman Oaks. Now, her restaurant, the Pineapple Hill Saloon and Grill, has outdoor dining. And the Governor Newsom, shut down the outdoor dining in her restaurant, closed her down. So she's a young woman. She's trying to provide for her family, for her children, by working hard to run this restaurant. And the governor says, no, I'm sorry, you are shut down. You are out of business until I tell you you aren't. Now listen to what she has to say. Listen carefully, because there's a staggering level of hypocrisy here that she reveals in what she says. You can find this online. She's doing a video, shows the exterior of her restaurant, and then goes on from there. Clip number 5.
I'm losing everything. Everything I own is being taken away from me. And they set up a movie company right next to my outdoor patio, which is right over here. And people wonder why I'm protesting and why I have had enough. They have not given us money and they have shut us down. We cannot survive. My staff cannot survive. Look at this. Tell me that this is dangerous, but right next to me as a slap in my face, that's safe. This is safe. 50 feet away. This is dangerous. Mayor Garcetti and Gavin Newsom is responsible for every single person that doesn't have unemployment, that does not have a job, and all the businesses that are going under. And we need your help. We need somebody to do something about this.
You know, it just breaks your heart listening to that. She's willing to work hard. She's willing to serve people, give them what they're looking for, and the governor will not let her do it. But meanwhile, there's a movie company or a TV company, and they have an entire outdoor seating area, dining area, set up 50 feet away from her restaurant, right across the street. And they got tables in there, and they got canopies. Obviously a place where they're going to feed the camera, the cast and crew. And she doesn't understand it, but obviously it's just tearing her apart.
Yeah, and if you look at a lot of these they're so-called outdoor dining by the movie company, they're actually kind of those tents, those white canopy tents that are, it's like creating an indoors outdoors. So, I mean, this is kind of that brings the hypocrisy to full circle. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, sure does. Now, along that line, so they need a sheriff there in Sherman Oaks that'll say the same thing that the sheriff of Riverside County. We're not going to enforce. These are stupid orders. There's no science behind them, because there isn't. There is no science behind lockdowns. There is no science behind masks. There is no science behind social distancing. None. Zero. All of these things. There's no science behind any of it. And yet they're being locked down. We need a sheriff all over the country. We need sheriffs in every jurisdiction in the United States of America to say, look, we are not going to enforce these orders. We don't have to. These are not the laws of our state. They're an unconstitutional edict from our governor or our mayor or whatever. We are not going to enforce it. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you live in this county, you live in this jurisdiction, just be sensible, be smart, but you're free to go about your normal behavior. We are not going to enforce these ridiculous, unscientific, we're not going to indulge in stupidity. This is stupidity on steroids, and we're not going to get caught up in it. Now, somebody else who's about had it with all this nonsense is Rick Santelli. Now, Rick Santelli, the guy you're about to hear from, he's the guy that started the Tea Party movement. Remember that rant that he went on back in 2009? He kick-started the entire Tea Party movement because he went on a rant. Now, one of the reasons I like to play Rick Santelli sound bites and Mark Levin sound bites, these guys make me sound like Mr. Rogers when they go on their, get on their high horse. Here's Rick Santelli, clip number 6. He's talking to Andrew Sorkin, who was photographed, by the way, outdoors dining. And he has this conversation with them on Squawk Box CNBC. Let's listen.
I think many of these governors are intelligent people, and they love their families, which they've taken out into restaurants. Therefore, there is actually and should be an ongoing debate as to, why a parking lot for a big box store like by my house is jam-packed. Not one parking spot open. Why are those people any safer than a restaurant with plexiglass? I just don't get it. And I think there's a million of these questions that could be asked.
The difference between a big box retailer and a restaurant, or frankly, even a church, are so different, it's unbelievable. Going into a big box retailer,
I disagree.
You're wearing
You can
a mask.
have your thoughts, and I can have mine.
You're required to wear a mask.
I disagree.
It's science. I'm sorry. It's science. If you're
It's
wearing a
not
mask,
science.
it's a different story.
500 people at a Lowe's aren't any safer than 150 people in a restaurant that holds 600. I don't believe it. Sorry. Don't believe
Okay.
it. And I live in an area where there's a lot of restaurants that have fought back and they don't have any problems. And they're open.
Okay. You don't have to believe it, but let me just say this. You're doing a disservice to the viewer because the viewers need to understand it.
You are doing a disservice to the viewer. You are. You are.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I would like to keep our viewers as healthy as humanly possible. The idea of packing people into restaurants.
I think our viewers are smart enough to make part of those decisions on their own.
Completely different
I don't think that I'm much smarter than all the viewers like some people do.
Like you, Andrew Sorkin. So, bottom line, Rick Santelli is welcome on Focal Point anytime he wants to come on. He makes me sound absolutely sane and calm and in complete control of my faculties.
That's an accomplishment.
I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that, Jeff.
Did I say that out loud?
Yeah, you said the quiet part out loud there.
Okay.
Yeah. I've got a couple of stories here as we come to the end of the program. Here's an article about how media-driven fear has completely warped our COVID response. This is a story based on research by scholars from Dartmouth College and Brown University. They analyzed the tone of COVID-19 coverage in articles written since January the 1st. They found this: 91% of the stories by U.S. major media outlets are negative in tone versus 54% from non-U.S. sources and 65% of scientific journals. So what's the media trying to do? They're trying to whip up hysteria, fear, and panic. That's why I occasionally call this not a pandemic, but a panic-demic. Now, and down in Florida, Governor Rick DeSantis doing a smart thing for the first time. You're going to have a state in the United States that's going to require that people that do coronavirus tests reveal the cycle threshold data in their COVID tests. We've talked about this before. The standard test right now, this PCR test, polymerase chain reaction, the gold standard test elevates detection to 40 cycles. It magnifies the presence of anything there. It's 40 cycles. I told you, got a member of my family, degree in molecular biology, did all kinds of PCR tests in laboratories. He said, the reality is, scientifically, you get anything above 30 cycles, it's just noise. It's meaningless. It doesn't provide you anything. So, and here's some of the headlines from some of these studies. Experts compiled 3 data sets with officials from the states of Massachusetts, New York, and Nevada. They concluded up to 90% of the people who tested positive did not carry a virus. With a CT threshold of 35, not even 40, half of those PCR tests would no longer be considered positive, and 70% would no longer be considered positive with a CT of 30. That's it for today. Bow low before God, stand tall before man, stand in the gap, never forget, we are fighting a winnable war. See you back here tomorrow.